What if I told you the moment you're about to skip might be the very moment your soul has been waiting for? Maybe you've been holding it together for too long, smiling on the outside but quietly slipping on the inside. You've prayed and waited and wondered if God still hears you. This message, it's not just for your ears, it's for your heart, for the parts of you that feel forgotten, for the places that ache in silence. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear could be the beginning of everything changing. You didn't say it out loud, you didn't send a message, you didn't cry in front of anyone, but something in you quietly whispered, "I can't keep doing this." There are moments in life so quiet, they almost seem invisible, not because they aren't real, but because no one else sees them. And right now, someone watching this knows exactly what I'm talking about. You've been walking through something heavy, and you're good at pretending. You smile when they expect you to. You show up where you're supposed to. But inside, you're tired in a way that sleep can't fix. You're not just physically tired, your soul is tired. Your hope has been fading like a light that once burned bright, but now flickers, barely holding on. You've told yourself, just one more push, just one more day. But that one more day has turned into weeks, maybe months, maybe longer. And now you're here, listening to this message, not by coincidence, not by accident, but because God saw you the moment you started to slip. He saw when your heart started to feel numb to things you used to care about. He saw when the joy you used to feel during worship turned into silent indifference. He saw the frustration behind your prayers, the ache in your voice when you asked him, "Do you even hear me anymore?" And more than anything, he saw what no one else could. You're almost gone. That's a terrifying place to be, not because you've fallen, but because you're right at the edge. Still standing, still functioning, still fine on the outside, but emotionally, spiritually, you're at the edge of the cliff. And if someone were to ask you to explain what's wrong, you wouldn't know how, because it's not one thing, it's everything. It's the weight of disappointment, the silent buildup of years of unanswered prayers, the sting of betrayal, confusion, isolation, and shame. Let's be honest, you didn't think you'd end up here. You used to believe big. You used to pray with fire. You used to dream with confidence. But life broke some of that. And piece by piece, your certainty eroded. And now you're here thinking, maybe I'm too broken for this. Maybe I missed the chance. Maybe God has stopped caring. Let me say this with trembling boldness, as if I'm whispering it straight into your weary soul. You are not invisible. You are not too far gone, and you are definitely not forgotten. You're not watching this message because someone shared a good quote or algorithm magic placed it in your feed. You're here because the God of all creation wanted this moment to happen. He knew your spirit was about to go dark. He saw the flicker of light that remains, and he came running. God wants you to know something urgent. You might feel like you're fading, but he has not let go. Even now, in the depth of your silence, he's holding you together. Even when your strength fails, his strength stands. And even when you feel like disappearing from the world, he is pulling you back into his arms. The truth is, many people don't realize what it means to be almost gone. It's not the dramatic fall everyone expects. It's not rebellion. It's not visible sin. It's subtle. It's slipping away 1 inch at a time. It's showing up in body, but checking out in spirit. It's worshiping with your hands lifted while your heart feels cold. It's praying out of habit, but not expectation. It's holding on barely, not to thrive, but just to survive. But hear this. God does not abandon survivors. In fact, he specializes in rescuing the almost gone. He sees the quiet warrior in you, the one who, despite everything, has chosen not to give up. And he wants you to know that small flame inside you, that barely there faith, that maybe just one more try in your heart, it's enough. It's enough for him to breathe life into again. Scripture says, "A bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out." Isaiah 42:3. That means he doesn't throw people away when they're weak. He doesn't despise you for struggling. He draws nearer. If you've been wondering, why haven't things changed? The answer may not be that God is far. It may be that He's been doing His deepest work in the dark places, the places where you feel almost gone. Because there's something powerful about reaching the edge. That's where everything gets stripped away. That's where pride dies. That's where masks fall off. That's where God doesn't just become a belief. He becomes your breath, your lifeline, your only option. And maybe that's why you're here. Maybe God allowed you to reach the edge, not to destroy you, but to finally bring you into the most real, raw, holy connection you've ever had with Him. Because in your breaking point, He wants to reveal something that a comfortable life never could. You don't need to have it all together for Him to show up. You just need to stop pretending you do. You need to let Him meet you, not where you think you should be, but where you really are. Let that sink in. Where you really are, not your social media version, not your Sunday morning smile, but your messy, doubting, tired, emotionally drained, God, please just help me hold on self. That's where He shows up. And here's the mystery. Sometimes the edge is where the greatest miracles begin. Because when you've exhausted all other sources of strength and you're still standing, the only explanation left is grace. Pure, sustaining grace. So if you're almost gone, don't let shame convince you you failed. You haven't. You're exactly where God knew you'd be, and He's already working your rescue. Not in a way that always makes sense, not overnight, but deeply, tenderly, thoroughly. He's rebuilding you from the inside out. And if you dare to keep walking, even in the dark, something holy will happen. The edge you thought would be your end becomes the very place your healing begins. Let that truth rest in you. You are not disqualified. You are not done. You are not abandoned. You are deeply seen, profoundly loved, and being held together by hands that will never let go. Now take a deep breath. Feel that. That's your soul catching hope again. God is not finished. Not with your story, not with your strength, not with your future. And this moment right here is proof that heaven is reaching toward you. You are not almost gone. You're almost restored. You're almost renewed. You're almost stepping into the next chapter that God has already written with your name on it. So stay, don't quit, don't disappear, don't fade away. There's more to see, more to become, and more to receive than you ever thought possible. God is not finished with you, not even close. Which do you believe describes your current spiritual state? A. I'm barely holding on, but I'm still here. B. I feel God restoring something in me even now. Comment your answer below, A or B, and let's see how many of us are walking through this together. He didn't expect to cry in the hallway. No one saw it, of course. The office door had just closed behind him, and with it, every ounce of composure he'd managed to fake that day. Elijah leaned his forehead against the cold wall, one hand gripping the edge of a chair, the other trembling beside his coat pocket. The day had started like any other in Maple Hollow, a town not known for chaos. But even in still places, storms can rage quietly. This wasn't about one moment. It was months, maybe years of built-up weight pressing against him from the inside out. He was tired of being strong. He was tired of keeping it together, tired of praying the same prayer, whispering the same hope, and waking up to the same silence. In truth, he didn't want to abandon faith, but he wasn't sure what was left of it to hold on to. Elijah's story is not rare. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. It's familiar. It's the quiet unraveling of a person who's been faithful but feels forgotten. And if that resonates, if some part of you understands the silent collapse of hope, then this message isn't just about Elijah. It's about you. Weakness is not something we're taught to embrace. We're told to overcome, push through, speak louder, work harder. But what happens when the spirit itself is tired? Not from lack of effort, but from too much effort without replenishment? This is the space where God does His most extraordinary work. Not when you feel powerful, but when you feel powerless. Paul the Apostle wrote, "My grace is sufficient for you, For my power is made perfect in weakness. That's not poetry, it's reality. A paradox so profound we often miss the invitation hidden inside it. When your spirit feels weak, that's not proof that God has abandoned you. It might just be proof that He's getting ready to show up in a way that changes everything. Let's pause there. Let that idea settle into the ache in your chest. When your soul is fatigued and you don't have the words anymore. When your once bold prayers now feel like breathless sighs. When showing up is the only thing you can do. That is enough. Because God isn't impressed by your strength. He's not waiting for you to perform spiritual gymnastics. He's waiting for you to collapse into His arms with nothing left, and finally let Him carry what you never could. There's a strange thing that happens when we stop pretending we're fine. We begin to feel God again. That's what happened to Elijah. Not the prophet from ancient Israel, but Elijah McCade from Maple Hollow. That day in the hallway wasn't his failure. It was the start of something sacred. He didn't hear thunder, he didn't see visions, but as he stood there, half numb, half ashamed, something broke open inside him and he whispered 3 words, "I am tired." That's all. No dramatic prayer, just honesty. But that's all it took. Because when Elijah let go of performing, God began to perform healing. That's what divine strength looks like. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it arrives as a quiet settling of the soul, a peace that doesn't explain itself. A moment where tears stop, not because the pain is gone, but because something greater has stepped in. This is the mystery of God's presence in weakness. It reorders everything. When God strengthens your spirit, it's not just about lifting your head. It's about recalibrating your soul. It's not just comfort, it's transformation. He doesn't patch the holes. He rebuilds the foundation. But that rebuilding often starts with surrender. That's the part many of us resist. We don't want to seem weak. We fear what people will think if we stop being the strong one. We're afraid that if we fall apart, no one will catch us. But God says, let go, fall, I will hold you. This isn't abstract. This is personal. You might feel like your spiritual life has been running on fumes. You still show up, still say the right things, but internally you're exhausted. You read scripture and feel numb. You try to worship but feel detached. You try to pray, but your words feel like echoes in an empty canyon. And yet, in the midst of that, God is near. He is not watching you struggle from a distance. He is in the center of the weariness, waiting for your honesty. He's not asking you to fake joy. He's inviting you to bring Him your sorrow. What if divine strength is not something you have to reach for? What if it's something you receive? Once you admit you can't do it alone, let's break the myth. Weakness is not failure. Weakness is often the doorway to encounter. You might feel like the best version of you has slipped away. But in God's eyes, the best version of you isn't the polished one. It's the one who comes to Him empty and says, I can't do this without you. This is where restoration begins. Elijah, after that hallway moment, didn't become instantly joyful, but he started walking again, not with his own strength, but with the awareness that he didn't have to carry it all. And the most beautiful thing happened weeks later. He stood in his backyard watching his little girl chase leaves in the wind. And for the first time in months, he felt it. Peace. Not perfect peace, but real peace. The kind that doesn't erase hardship, but steadies you within it. He said aloud, as if speaking to no one, I thought I had to fix everything, but maybe God just wanted me to let Him hold me. Friend, that same invitation is extended to you. You don't have to fake strength anymore. You don't have to be the hero. You don't have to earn God's nearness. You just need to be honest enough to say, I'm weak. Because in that moment, you'll begin to experience what Paul discovered. God's strength isn't given to the qualified. It's revealed to the surrendered. You were never meant to carry the burden alone. You were never expected to power through spiritual fatigue. You were designed for connection, for divine infusion, for sacred dependence. So here's what you can do right now. Find a quiet space. Put your hand over your heart and simply whisper, I can't do this without you. You don't need fancy words. You don't need dramatic change. You just need sincerity. Because your weakness is not the enemy. It's the canvas for God's greatest masterpiece. And slowly, steadily, as you yield, divine strength will rise in you. It will look like resilience when you should have broken. It will sound like hope when everyone else gave up. It will feel like joy when circumstances haven't yet changed. It will be God living in you. You're not done. You're not defective. You're just being prepared. Prepared for a strength you didn't know existed. Let go. Lean in. And let His power make your weakness holy ground. The first thing Elijah noticed wasn't the return of joy. It was the return of silence. But this time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt sacred. In the weeks that followed his breakdown in the hallway, something had shifted. Not dramatically, not loudly, but undeniably. It was as though God had slipped into the corners of his days, whispering peace into the chaos and presence into the pain. And in that quiet shift, something deeper began: restoration. The strange thing about true restoration is that it rarely starts where we think it will. We often pray for God to fix the obvious, our job, our finances, our relationships. But God, being who He is, often starts in a hidden place. The place where identity lives, where wounds linger unseen, and where the lies we've believed about ourselves have quietly shaped our decisions for years. Elijah didn't realize how much of his worth had been tied to performance, how deeply he believed that unless he was strong, he was unworthy of love or respect. He had learned that lesson early in life, long before Maple Hollow, long before his career. As a boy, he had watched his father walk out and heard the silence that followed. That silence taught him something untrue, that being abandoned meant being unworthy. He never said those words aloud, but they lived beneath his skin. Until the day God began to dismantle the lie. Restoration doesn't always look like healing. Sometimes it looks like unlearning. God didn't just speak comfort to Elijah. He spoke truth. And truth, when it cuts deep enough, can rebuild a person from the inside out. One morning, as Elijah walked through the wooded trail behind his home, he stopped in the clearing by the old sycamore tree. That spot had become his sanctuary. No worship music, no podcasts, just breath and trees and heaven close enough to feel. And in that place, something happened. He sat down on the dirt, leaned his back against the bark, and whispered, "I think I've spent my life trying to earn something you already gave me." The words surprised even him, but they were true. He had tried to earn peace through performance, tried to earn love through self-sufficiency, tried to earn security by never falling apart. But in doing so, he had buried the boy who once believed he was loved just because he was his father's son, and then confused God with that same flawed blueprint. That's when the restoration deepened. God doesn't just fix behavior, He heals the beliefs underneath it. He restores the self, the version of you that existed before pain distorted your lens. In Maple Hollow, Elijah began to walk differently, not in stride but in soul. His shoulders relaxed, his voice softened, not because his life was easier, but because his identity was no longer tied to outcomes. And that's when the unexpected started to happen. One by one, relationships that had grown distant began to reawaken. His sister, Rachel, estranged for over 2 years after an argument neither fully remembered, sent him a message. No apology, no explanation, just 6 words. "Can we talk sometime this week?" It wasn't perfect, but it was a beginning. That's the fruit of internal restoration. Things outside begin to fall into alignment, not because we control them, but because peace becomes our center. Elijah had once prayed for God to change the world around him, but now he thanked God for changing him, and the world around him responded to that new energy. That's what people don't always understand. Restoration doesn't mean God gives you back the old. It means He gives you what you never had but always needed. Sometimes He doesn't restore the job. He restores your sense of purpose, Sometimes he doesn't restore the relationship. He restores your capacity to love without fear. Sometimes he doesn't restore the plan. He restores your trust that his plan is better. Elijah began keeping a restoration journal, not filled with goals or declarations, just quiet observations of what was being rebuilt. The way he could breathe without pressure, the way fear no longer dominated his decisions, the way God's presence felt more like home than obligation. One entry read, "I didn't know God could feel like this, not just sacred, but safe." That line captured something deeper than theology. It captured transformation, because God is not just a rescuer, he is a restorer, and restoration is intimate. It touches what trauma tried to bury. It brings to light the lies that shaped your self-perception. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It doesn't push, it heals. And most of all, it doesn't rush. Restoration takes time, and that's why many miss it, because they want results, not renewal. But Elijah stayed, he waited, he listened, and the deeper the stillness, the clearer the truth became. God wasn't just fixing the man, he was raising the child within him, the one who once danced without shame, laughed without fear, and loved without guarding his heart. Now, you may not be sitting beneath a sycamore tree in Maple Hollow, but you have a place, a space where your soul whispers what your voice has been afraid to say. And God meets people there. He's not asking you to undo your past. He's asking you to bring him your present, raw, unfinished, and real, because that's where the rebuilding begins. So what does restoration look like in your life? It may start with forgiveness of others or maybe yourself. It may begin with letting go of false strength and embracing holy honesty. It may require grieving what was lost, not to wallow, but to make space for what's coming. God wants to restore your sense of wonder. He wants to rebuild your capacity for joy. He wants to plant new dreams in the soil of surrendered sorrow. And you don't have to feel ready, you just have to be willing. Elijah was, and over time, something beautiful began to bloom. He started showing up in places he used to avoid. He began calling people back instead of ghosting them. He signed up to mentor young men in the local church, not as a perfect example, but as a living story of healing. And perhaps most telling of all, he started singing again, not just in church, in the kitchen, in the car, in the backyard, not for performance, for presence. Because restoration doesn't just rebuild your life, it gives you back your song. The one that hardship tried to silence, the one that sorrow tried to steal, the one your soul was created to sing. So here's the question you must ask yourself. Are you willing to let God rebuild you from the inside out? Not just fix what's broken, but reveal what's always been beautiful. Because restoration isn't about going back to who you were. It's about becoming who you were always meant to be. And if you let him, he will restore you in ways that surprise you. He will speak peace into places you forgot needed healing. And he will give you joy, not for show, but for strength. Just like Elijah, you may find yourself one day standing in a familiar place, but seeing everything with new eyes. Not because the world changed, but because you did. The wind had changed in Maple Hollow. It wasn't just the arrival of spring, it was something Elijah McCade could feel in his spirit. A movement, a pull, a quiet urging that whispered, "It's time." It wasn't urgency, it was invitation. And Elijah knew, without being able to explain it, that God was shifting something again. But this time it wasn't about healing what was broken. This was about stepping into something new, something uncharted, something holy. The strange thing about divine transition is that it doesn't always come with clarity. It comes with conviction. You feel it before you see it. You sense it before you can name it. And for Elijah, that sense began to grow with each quiet morning walk, with each conversation that felt strangely significant, with each closed door that didn't sting, but instead felt like release. He wasn't the same man who had broken down in a hallway. That version of him had been rebuilt, restored, redeemed. And now he stood in the quiet tension between the comfort of what was and the mystery of what could be. It was unsettling at first. Newness always is. We say we want change, but we often resist it, especially when it threatens our sense of control. But God doesn't call us to safety. He calls us to surrender. And Elijah began to realize that the restoration God had been doing inside him was preparation for movement, not just emotionally, but literally. A new job offer had come, unexpected, out of town, out of state. It would mean leaving the familiar trails of Maple Hollow, the sycamore tree, even the home where he'd rediscovered his identity. It would mean stepping into unfamiliar territory with no guarantees, just God's gentle nudge. Trust me. At first he resisted. God, I've just gotten stable again, he prayed one evening under a cloudy sky. I've just found peace here. Why now? But that night, in a dream that felt more like a conversation, Elijah saw himself holding an old suitcase. Inside were fragments of his former self. Broken expectations, past regrets, familiar routines, old fears dressed up as logic. He stood at a train platform, hesitating to board, and then a voice, not loud but certain, spoke, "What I have for you next won't fit in what you're trying to carry." He woke up breathless, the echo still in his chest. That was the moment he knew. The shift wasn't a test. It was a promise. God wasn't removing comfort to cause pain. He was making space for growth, and growth always requires letting go. Letting go of the past, even the good parts. Letting go of control, even when it's disguised as wisdom. Letting go of fear, even when it feels justified. The people of Maple Hollow had become Elijah's family. The trails had become his sanctuary. But now God was calling him to become sanctuary for others elsewhere. Because healing isn't the end of the story. Healing is what qualifies you to carry healing into other places. And Elijah understood. This wasn't just about a new address. It was about a new assignment. New paths always feel fragile at first. But God's promises are not fragile. They are firm even when the ground beneath your feet is shifting. So Elijah said yes. He packed his belongings slowly, not with dread, but with reverence. Each item was a symbol of where he'd been, who he'd become, and where God was taking him next. He left the house before dawn on his final morning in Maple Hollow, not to escape, but to honor. He stood under the sycamore tree one last time, ran his hand across the bark, and whispered, "Thank you for meeting me here." Then he did something unexpected. He knelt and placed a small, folded piece of paper at the base of the tree. Inside were 3 words, "You're not alone." He hoped that someday someone else walking through pain would find it. And maybe, just maybe, it would be what they needed to keep going. Because that's what healed people do. They leave trails of hope behind them. As Elijah drove away, he didn't feel grief. He felt release. Because when God leads, he also goes before. The destination? A new town called Brenton Hills. A smaller community with bigger challenges. A faith center in need of leadership. Not a title Elijah had sought, but one God had assigned. He arrived quietly. No fanfare, no announcement. Just a man carrying peace in his bones and fire in his belly. At first, he observed. He listened more than he spoke, and as the weeks passed, he began to see why he'd been sent. The people of Brenton Hills were hurting, not from chaos, but from weariness. Dreams deferred, purpose diluted, faith dulled by routine. They were doing church, but they weren't living with fire. And Elijah didn't show up to critique. He showed up to ignite. He began gathering a few people each week, not in a building, but in his backyard. They shared stories, meals, moments of vulnerability. He didn't preach. He asked questions. What's something God used to stir in you that you've stopped believing for? What did you used to pray for but stopped asking? What part of your life feels asleep? The conversations were hesitant at first, but then they deepened, because Elijah knew the language of almost giving up. He spoke it fluently, but now he also spoke the language of resurrection, and it spread. One by one, people began to awaken, not to religion, but to relationship, not to activity, but to presence, not to striving, but to surrender. The shift had come, and here's the truth. It didn't begin with a sermon. It began with a life surrendered to a new path. When Elijah embraced the shift, he didn't just change his location, he became a catalyst for change. That's what happens when we stop asking God to keep us comfortable and start asking Him to make us useful. He leads us into spaces we would have avoided, to become voices we didn't think we could be. You may feel it now, the stir, the pull, the gentle disruption in your spirit. And you're wondering, is it time to move, to let go, to say yes to something unknown? Here's how you'll know. You'll feel a holy dissatisfaction with the familiar, not because it's bad, but because it's too small for what's next. You'll feel a sacred ache for something more, not material, but meaningful. And you'll hear that quiet voice again. Trust me. New paths will test your trust, but they will also reveal your calling. So what if the shift you fear is the very thing that will release the version of you that has been waiting to come alive? What if your next yes doesn't just change your life, but set someone else free too? Elijah didn't know that Brenton Hills would become a place of revival. He didn't know that backyard conversations would spark a movement. He just knew he couldn't stay where he was. He had been restored for a reason, and now he was walking in it. That same invitation stands before you. The shift may not be a move. It may be a conversation, a decision, a surrender, a new direction inside your heart. Whatever it is, don't fight it. God is not pushing you away from something. He's drawing you toward what you were made for. New paths, new promises, and a new kind of faith that walks with boldness, even when the map isn't clear, because the one who calls you isn't confused, and his path, however winding, always leads to life. There was no music playing, no applause echoing through the small building on the corner of Willow Street in Brenton Hills. But in that quiet Sunday morning gathering, as Elijah McCade stood at the front of the room, something undeniable filled the air. The room was different now. Where once sat rows of weary faces, unsure eyes, and guarded hearts, now there were people glowing with a peace they hadn't known in years. A woman named Charlene, who once hadn't prayed aloud in decades, had just shared how she felt joy again for the first time since burying her son. A young father named Marcus, who once sat in the back with arms crossed, had tears running down his face as he held his daughter and whispered, "We're going to be okay." And in that still moment, Elijah's heart swelled, not with pride, but with awe. This is what deliverance looks like. It's not flashy. It's not a single moment captured on camera. It's the slow, sacred, steady unveiling of lives changed from the inside out. And the greatest surprise of all, it wasn't just the people in the room who were transformed. It was Elijah. He never set out to lead. He never asked for influence. He wasn't looking for a platform. But that's what happens when you surrender completely. God doesn't just deliver you from something. He delivers you into something. Freedom isn't the finish line. It's the foundation. And for Elijah, freedom had become the soil from which everything new began to grow. He no longer woke up dreading the day. He no longer saw his weaknesses as liabilities. He no longer wondered if he was enough, because now he lived from a deep, immovable truth. He was delivered, and the deliverance was lasting. This new season wasn't about proving anything. It was about living everything God had rebuilt inside him. He moved through the world with a kind of strength that didn't shout, but steadied. He led with compassion, not charisma. He served with consistency, not striving. He listened more than he talked, because he understood what it meant to be heard by God when no one else was listening. This was the fruit of real transformation, a life that no longer needed attention to feel worthy, a life rooted in presence, not performance, a life that became an answer to someone else's prayer. And that's the truth many forget in their pursuit of healing. Your restoration was never just about you. It was always about others too. Because when you've walked through fire and emerged refined, You don't just carry your testimony, you carry authority. You become safe space for someone else's unraveling. You become light in someone else's midnight. You become the evidence that God still delivers, still restores, and still calls people into purpose. Elijah began to mentor young men from across town. Some were fresh out of rehab. Others came from broken homes. They didn't always understand the Bible, but they understood his story, because pain speaks a universal language, and healing does too. One of the boys, 18-year-old Jonah, asked him one afternoon, "How did you know you were finally free?" Elijah smiled, leaned forward, and said, "Because I stopped trying to escape, and I started building from what God gave me." That's what delivered people do. They don't run from pain. They turn it into a place of ministry. They don't hide their past. They allow it to become proof of redemption. And slowly, Elijah's life became a ripple effect, not in grand gestures, but in small, meaningful ways. He started a midweek dinner for single parents. He opened a corner of the center for quiet prayer each morning. He taught people how to sit still before God, not to feel spiritual, but to be known. And most importantly, he reminded them of something most had forgotten. You don't need to do anything impressive for God to love you. You just need to stay close. The atmosphere in Brenton Hills changed over time. It wasn't just the church. It was the streets, the homes, the hearts. Joy returned. Purpose reawakened. Love flowed like a quiet river. And Elijah, he kept walking. He never went back to being the strong one. He became the faithful one, the one who knew when to lead and when to kneel, the one who learned that true deliverance isn't about feeling good. It's about doing good out of a heart finally set free. But the story doesn't end with him, because this is where it turns to you. Maybe you've been watching this whole journey, seeing parts of your own life in Elijah's pain, his healing, his questions. Maybe you've felt the pull in your spirit to believe that your broken places still matter, that they still carry potential, that they still hold value. And maybe you've wondered, what now? What do you do after you've been restored? How do you live once you've been delivered? The answer is simple. You live with intention. You live like your life is part of someone else's rescue story. You live like your scars are proof of God's mercy. You live like your hands were healed so you can help someone else stand. You live with a heart open, not just to receive, but to give. You mentor, you encourage, you forgive, you create, you serve. You speak up when someone else goes silent, not to earn worth, but because worth has already been spoken over you. And every morning you wake up and say, I am not who I was. I am being made new, not just once, but again and again as grace unfolds in ordinary moments. You become a living invitation, proof that God still writes better endings than the world expected for you. So today, remember this. Your deliverance is not fragile. It is firm, it is finished, and it is fruitful. Walk forward in it. Let your life be the open door through which others find hope. Let your actions be the echo of the freedom you've received. Let your days be filled not with striving, but with sacred stillness, knowing you are kept, called, and chosen. Like Elijah McCade, you have a story, and it's not over. Let your journey become someone's spark. Let your life become someone's light. Let your restoration become a river that refreshes dry places around you. You are the delivered, and this world needs the sound of your steps, not just walking away from bondage, but walking into purpose. This is your time, this is your season, this is your path. And the one who delivered you, he walks with you still. Before you scroll away, pause for just one more moment. If something in this message stirred your heart, if even one sentence reminded you that you're not forgotten, not too far gone, not disqualified, then don't let that moment pass in silence. This wasn't just a video. This was a divine interruption, a sacred invitation, a whisper from heaven saying, I see you. I'm not done with you. You're not here by accident. You're part of a greater story, a story of redemption, of revival, of restoration that doesn't end with you. It starts with you. So here's what I ask. Don't keep this moment to yourself. If it moved you, share it. Not because I asked, but because someone else needs to hear this. Someone in your life is standing where you once stood, on the edge of giving up, unsure if God still sees them. Be their reminder. Drop a comment below. Tell me what part hit you the hardest. Let your voice join a community of people rising from ashes, choosing hope, stepping into healing. Type one word, or your whole story, but speak. This space is safe. And if you're still holding on, barely, then hear this. God is not done with you. You're just getting started. Now go, carry this light into your world, and let your life speak louder than any fear ever could. You are seen, you are chosen, you are deeply, endlessly loved. And your next step, it could change everything. Let's walk forward together.